Hello, and welcome to the Warfighter Wire, your weekly roundup of the most significant news and developments from across the United States Department of Defense. I'm your host, and we are tracking the major stories for the last week of August 2025. This week was a major inflection point at the Pentagon, a moment where a long-term strategy began to crystallize into hard reality. We saw three dominant themes emerge: a major reorganization to counter the pervasive threat of small drones, the literal first flight of a next-generation warfighting capability that will redefine air combat, and a concerted, multi-billion-dollar effort to reinforce key alliances in the world that seems to get more unstable by the day. From the establishment of a new high-level task force to a landmark flight for autonomous aircraft and a new medal for troops on the southern border, there's a lot to cover. We'll break down the biggest stories from the Pentagon, then go service by service through the Air Force, Space Force, Army, Navy, and Marines, and we'll close out with a look of the future of warfare with DARPA. Let's get started with the big picture from the Office of the Secretary of Defense. The biggest structural change out of the Pentagon this week was the establishment of a new task force to deal with a threat that has proven its lethality from the battlefields of Ukraine to the U.S. southern border: small, hostile drones. On August 28th, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announced the creation of the Joint Interagency Task Force 401, or JIATF 401. This new organization is tasked with a single critical mission: delivering affordable and effective counter-small unmanned aerial systems, or C-sUAS, to protect U.S. personnel and facilities both at home and abroad. This move elevates the drone threat from a service-level problem to a national security imperative. It also dissolves the previous Army-led office that was formed back in 2019. The structure of the JIATF 401 tells you everything you need to know about how seriously the DoD is taking this. The task force will report directly to Deputy Secretary of Defense, giving it an authority to, in the Secretary's words, cut through bureaucracy, consolidate resources, and outpace our adversaries. The designation as a Joint Interagency Task Force is also incredibly significant. That structure is typically reserved for high-priority national security missions like counter-narcotics, which require seamless coordination between all the military services and other government agencies. This acknowledges that the threat from cheap, commercially available drones has simply outpaced the Pentagon's previous, more fragmented approach. The mission even explicitly includes ensuring sovereignty over our national airspace, making it clear that the DoD sees this as a seamless challenge that spans from a distant battlefield right back to the United States homeland. In other news, from the Secretary's office, a new medal has been created to recognize the military's long-term support mission on the U.S.-Mexico border. Secretary Hegseth announced the establishment of the Mexican Border Defense Medal, or MBDM. This award is authorized for any service members who have been deployed for at least 30 days, consecutive or not, in support of U.S. Customs and Border Patrol operations. The eligible area is defined as U.S. land within 100 nautical miles of the border across California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, as well as adjacent waters. The creation of a unique medal like this serves two purposes. First, it institutionally elevates the mission to the level of a distinct military operation, giving a new layer of legitimacy to the sustained deployment of troops, mostly from the National Guard. Its order of precedence reinforces this, being placed after the Korea Defense Service Medal but before the Armed Forces Service Medal, which it replaces for this specific duty. Second, it's a morale and retention incentive for the mission that can be politically contentious and places a significant strain on Guard forces. In a nod to history, the medal's design is identical to that of the Mexican Border Service Medal from 1918, a deliberate effort to create a sense of historical continuity. The design features a sheathed Roman sword, which symbolizes military service performed in a non-combat role. The Pentagon also took time this week to commemorate a painful anniversary. On August 26th, the DoD and the White House marked the 4th anniversary of the suicide bombing at Abbey Gate during the 2021 withdrawal from Afghanistan, which killed 13 U.S. service members and around 170 Afghan civilians. But the official statements went beyond just commemoration. The DoD highlighted the continuing work of a special review panel convened by Secretary Hegseth and President Trump to investigate what they termed the botched withdrawal. The panel's stated mission is to deliver a full accountability and restoring trust. The White House proclamation was even more pointed, calling the withdrawal the single most embarrassing display of American foreign policy in the history of our country. It's clear the administration is leveraging the anniversary to pursue a policy of political and historical revisionism, using the formal mechanisms of the DoD to produce an official record that assigns blame to the previous administration. Finally, the department demonstrated its commitment to allies with a major diplomatic and sales initiatives. On August 26th, U.S. and Indian defense and foreign affairs officials held a virtual 2-on-2 intersessional dialogue. The talks advanced a range of initiatives aimed at deepening the strategic partnership between the two countries, driven by a shared goal of counterbalancing China's growing influence. Key outcomes included a commitment to advance negotiations on a new 10-year defense partnership framework and to enhance cooperation in defense industrial production. This signals a mature relationship moving beyond simple arms sales towards a more integrated partnership. On the sales front, the Defense Secretary Cooperation Agency notifies Congress of several major proposed foreign military sales, totaling billions of dollars. These include a massive $1.85 billion F-35 Lightning II sustainment and logistics package for Poland, an $861 million deal for the United Kingdom to sustain its fleet of C-17 Globemaster strategic transport aircraft, and a sale of AIM-9X Sidewinder Block II tactical missiles to the NATO Support and Procurement Agency, valued at around $104 million. These large-scale sustainment packages are just as crucial as selling the planes in the first place. They ensure the long-term operational readiness of key NATO allies and effectively lock them into a U.S. defense ecosystem for decades. The F-35 package for Poland in particular is a critical investment in maintaining a credible fifth-generation deterrent on NATO's eastern flank. Turning now to the Air Force, which had arguably the most significant technological and doctrinal development of the week, if not the year. On August 27th, the Department of the Air Force announced the successful first flight of a Collaborative Combat Aircraft or CCA prototype. This is a landmark achievement. The aircraft, identified as General Atomics YFQ-42A, got into the air less than 2 years after the program was officially launched, a major win for the service's rapid acquisition efforts. A competing prototype from the company Anduril is expected to fly soon as well. To put it plainly, this flight marks the tangible beginning of a fundamental transformation in air power. We are moving away from a reliance on small numbers of incredibly expensive crewed fighter jets to a new paradigm of human-machine teaming. The CCA program is the Air Force's answer to the strategic challenge of generating what it calls an affordable mass. That is, having enough platforms in the air to be effective in a fight against a peer adversary like China. The successful flight proves that the core technology is viable, and it now forces the Air Force to answer a whole host of urgent questions that are previously just theoretical. How do you train pilots to command autonomous wingmen? What are the rules of engagement for lethal autonomy? And how does a successful CCA program change the number of F-35s and next-generation crewed aircraft that services needed to buy? This single event has made finding the answers to those questions an immediate priority. While developing future capabilities, the Air Force also remains heavily engaged with partners around the world. U.S. Air Force F-16 Fighting Falcons from the 55th Expeditionary Fighter Squadron arrived in Cairo West Air Base in Egypt to participate in Exercise Bright Star 25. This is a massive, multinational exercise co-hosted by the U.S. Central Command and the Egyptian Armed Forces, involving personnel from over 40 nations. Running from August 28th to September 10th, the exercise is designed to enhance regional security by training forces to respond to a wide spectrum of modern threats. In an era where U.S. strategic focus has largely shifted to the Pacific, this long-running exercise is a powerful demonstration of America's enduring commitment to the partners in the Middle East. On a personnel and readiness front, Air Force Global Strike Command has resumed the use of the M18 service pistol, albeit with a new inspection rule. The weapon's use has been suspended across the entire service after a fatal shooting incident at F.E. Warren Air Force Base in July, where an airman was killed when an M18 discharged. Initial reports had raised concerns that the weapon might have gone off without the trigger being pulled, prompting a full safety investigation. This whole episode highlights how the introduction of a new standard issue equipment can have significant impacts on safety and readiness, and it shows the process that the Air Force uses to address a crisis of confidence in a fundamental piece of gear. The nation's newest military branch, the U.S. Space Force, also hit several critical milestones this week, focusing on building its unique culture and executing its core missions. In a landmark event for the service, the Space Force graduated its first ever class of Guardian officers from its own dedicated officer training course at Peterson Space Force Base on August 28th. Before this, Space Force officers were commissioned through the Air Force's training programs. By establishing its own commissioning source, the Space Force is taking a crucial step in forging a distinct cultural and professional identity from its officer corps right from the very start of their careers. This is essential for building a service with a unique space-focused doctrine and ethos. On the strategic front, the Space Force and military partners from 9 allied nations concluded the 2-week Shriver War Game 2025 on August 26th. This is the service's premier war game designed to explore critical space issues, test military strategies, and strengthen international cooperation in the space domain. The heavy emphasis on international participation underscores the U.S. strategy of building the coalition-based approach to space security, working to establish international norms and deter aggression from rivals like China and Russia. And executing its primary mission of providing space access, the Space Force, working with SpaceX, successfully launched the 8th mission of the secretive X-37B orbital test vehicle on August 22nd from Kennedy Space Center. The uncrewed, reusable spaceplane remains one of the military's most advanced development efforts. Previous missions have broken on-orbit endurance records and tested advanced technologies. The X-37B gives the U.S. a unique ability to test and mature next-generation space technologies in an operational environment, away from the prying eyes of adversaries, providing a critical advantage in the technological race in space. Finally, the Space Force's strategy of leveraging the commercial space industry is paying a huge dividend. An unprecedented 150 companies have signaled their interest in the service's next-generation RG-XX satellite program. This program aims to create a resilient global communications network using a proliferated low Earth orbit or LEO architecture, basically a massive constellation of smaller, cheaper satellites instead of a few big, expensive, and vulnerable ones in higher orbits. This massive industry interest validates the Space Force's acquisition strategy, which is designed to foster a more competitive and innovative industrial base, drive down costs, and dramatically speed up the fielding of new technology. The U.S. Army was focused on modernization, major new contracts, and its continued role in the domestic operations. The Army is making real progress in building its capabilities in the non-kinetic domains of the cyber and electromagnetic spectrum. A great example is the Georgia Army's National Guard's 111th Electromagnetic Warfare Company, which was just activated in June. They recently completed their first dedicated field training exercise, Operation Golden Corridor, honing skills like spectrum mapping and radio frequency detection in austere environments. This was echoed at the strategic level by the Army's new Principal Cyber Advisor, Brandon Pugh, who outlined his key priorities. These included accelerating the development of AI capabilities and, importantly, better integrating the talents of the National Guard and Army Reserve into the service's cyber efforts. This total Army approach recognizes that many reservists have high-end tech skills from their civilian jobs, providing a deep talent pool that the active force can leverage to keep pace with adversaries. In Europe, the Army continues to build interoperability with key allies. A team of U.S. Army automated logistics specialists from the 1st Armored Division conducted training for their Polish counterparts at the Army pre-positioned Stocks 2 worksite in Powidz, Poland. The training focused on the Global Combat Support System Army, which is the U.S. Army's core logistics and financial software. This kind of granular systems-level training is what allows for seamless combined operations in a crisis, ensuring that the massive stockpiles of equipment held at the Powidz site can be effectively issued to and be used by Polish forces, dramatically increasing combat readiness. On the procurement front, the Army awarded a massive contract modification to Raytheon worth $1.7 billion for the low-rate initial production of the new lower-tier air and missile defense system, or LTAMDS. This brings the total contract value to $3.8 billion and notably includes foreign military sales funds for Poland. LTAMDS is the next-generation 360-degree radar that will replace the current radar on the Patriot missile system. This huge investment signals the Army's urgent priority to field a system that can defeat advanced aerial threats, including hypersonic weapons. Including Poland as a partner from the very beginning of production shows a clear strategy to create a unified and superior air and missile defense network across NATO's most vulnerable frontier. However, this week wasn't without any controversy for the Army. Significant questions have arisen around the contract worth up to $1.2 billion to build and operate large-scale immigration detention facility out of Fort Bliss, Texas. This contract was awarded to a small Virginia-based firm called Acquisitions Logistics LLC, which has no public record of experience running a correctional facility and whose largest previous federal contract was only $16 million. The Pentagon has refused to release the contract or provide a detailed justification for its choice, citing ongoing litigation from a competitor who alleges that the awardee is unqualified. The lack of transparency and the selection of a seemingly inexperienced vendor for such a massive and sensitive project has drawn concern from the members of Congress and contracting experts. It appears that the normal checks and balances of the federal acquisition system may have been strained to meet an accelerated political imperative, placing the Army in a difficult position of executing a controversial mission with a contractor whose ability to perform is a major unanswered question. The Navy was busy projecting power across the globe while also engaging in significant outreach efforts here at home. The August 25th Fleet and Marine Tracker gives us a clear map of the Navy's globe posture. In the Indo-Pacific, the USS George Washington Carrier Strike Group was underway in the Philippine Sea. In Japan, the amphibious Sol ship USS Tripoli was preparing to take over from the USS America as the forward-deployed crisis response big deck amphibious warship. In Europe, the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group was conducting operations in the North Sea, reassuring NATO allies and countering Russia's naval activity. And in the Middle East, the Nimitz Carrier Strike Group was operating in the northern Arabian Sea, while other destroyers were deployed to the eastern Mediterranean and the Red Sea to ensure freedom of navigation through critical maritime checkpoints. This global distribution of naval power is the physical manifestation of the national defense strategy. The Navy was also projecting soft power. The hospital ship USNS Comfort just concluded its Continuing Promise 2025 mission. From June to August, the ship provided medical, dental, veterinary, and engineering assistance to communities in 6 partner nations across Central and South America and the Caribbean. Since its inception, this mission has treated over 601,000 patients, building invaluable goodwill and strengthening partnerships. On the home front, the Navy held a Navy Week in Branson and Springfield, Missouri, one of 15 such events scheduled for 2025. These outreach events are crucial for recruitment and for maintaining a connection between the American public and its military. And in one of the week's largest contract awards, the Navy gave BAE Systems a $1.743 billion contract for the full-rate production of up to 55,000 Advanced Precision Kill Weapon Systems 2, or APKWS-2 guidance kits. This amazing system transforms a standard unguided 2.75-inch rocket into a laser-guided precision weapon. This massive procurement highlights the value the DoD places on affordable precision, providing a low-cost, high-volume munition for targets that don't require a more expensive missile like the Hellfire. This is critical for replenishing stockpiles that have been depleted by years of conflict and support to allies. Meanwhile, the U.S. Marine Corps is in the midst of a sophisticated nationwide campaign to celebrate its 250th anniversary. The service just concluded Marine Week Boston on August 25th, which included static displays on the Boston Common and performances by the world-famous Silent Drill Platoon. They immediately pivoted to Marine Week Atlanta, which ran through September 1st and was timed to coincide with the Aflac kickoff college football game. By hosting these large, immersive events in major cities, the Marine Corps is aiming to connect with a broad civilian audience, reinforce its brand as the nation's elite force in readiness, and inspire a new generation of recruits during what are challenging times for military recruiting across all services. Finally, today, we turn to the Pentagon's innovative engine, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, which is tackling one of the U.S. military's biggest strategic vulnerabilities. On August 27th, DARPA officially launched the first phase of its Robust Quantum Sensors, or ROQS program. The goal is to solve the biggest problem with quantum technology, its fragility. Quantum sensors offer unbelievable precision in detecting tiny variations in gravity, magnetic fields, and acceleration, but they've historically been so sensitive that they can only work in pristine lab environments. The ROQS program aims to create sensors that are tough enough to function reliably on military platforms like submarines, helicopters, or satellites that are subject to intense vibrations and temperature swings. Why is this so important? Because a successful, ruggedized quantum sensor could break the military's deep and dangerous reliance on the Global Positioning System, or GPS. Nearly every modern military operation depends on GPS for positioning, navigation, and timing, or PNT. Our adversaries, particularly China and Russia, have developed sophisticated capabilities to jam, spoof, or even destroy GPS satellites, creating a massive strategic vulnerability. A successful quantum sensor could provide highly precise, self-contained navigation by referencing local gravitational or magnetic fields, allowing a ship or aircraft to know exactly where it is in a completely GPS-denied environment. It's a direct attempt to leap ahead of adversary strategies and develop a disruptive capability that would provide a decisive military advantage. As part of the launch, DARPA awarded Q-Control, a leader in quantum infrastructure software, contracts worth a combined $24.4 million to work on the program. So, as we look back at the final week of August 2025, the picture that emerges is of a Department of Defense in a state of accelerated transformation. The overarching theme is a transition from a strategic concept to a tangible capability, from theory to reality. The establishment of the Counter-Drone Task Force and the first flight of the CCA prototype aren't just bureaucratic or technical milestones. They represent fundamental shifts in how the U.S. military is organizing and equipping itself to fight in a new era defined by autonomous weapon systems and asymmetrical threats. At the same time, massive investments in allied capabilities and persistent joint training show the collective defense remains the bedrock of U.S. national security strategy. However, the controversy over the Fort Bliss contract shows that the DoD must still navigate complex internal and political pressures that can challenge its own institutional norms. Overall, the week's events signal a defense enterprise that is urgently preparing for a future of high-end, technologically advanced, and coalition-based conflict. That is all the time we have for this week at the Warfighter Wire. Thank you for joining us. If you liked it, please like and subscribe. Thank you.